Dr. Elena Vasquez rubbed her tired eyes and took another sip of cold coffee. She had been working at the Deep Space Monitoring Station for 12 hours straight. The station called Cerberus floated in the darkness beyond Pluto, far from Earth's warm sun. Her job was to listen for signals from other worlds. Most days she heard nothing but the quiet hum of space. But today was different. The computer made a soft beeping sound. Elena looked at her screen and saw something that made her heart race. A signal was coming from the direction of Proxima Centauri, the closest star to Earth's solar system. The signal was strong and clear. Too clear to be natural. Computer, analyze the signal, Elena said. The machine worked for several minutes. Then words appeared on the screen. Signal is artificial. Mathematical patterns detected. Possible intelligent origin. Elena's hands shook as she called her team. Dr. James Park, the station's communication expert, arrived first. Behind him came Captain Sarah Mills, the military liaison, and Dr. Ahmed Hassan, the computer specialist. "What do we have?" Captain Mills asked. "First contact," Elena whispered. "Someone out there is trying to talk to us." The team worked through the night to decode the signal. At first they thought it might be mathematics or science, but as the computer translated more of the message, they realized something was wrong. Very wrong. The signal was not a greeting. It was a broadcast, and what they saw made them all feel sick. The screen showed creatures that looked almost human. They had 2 arms, 2 legs, and faces that showed fear and pain, but they were not human. Their skin was pale blue and their eyes were larger than human eyes. They were clearly intelligent. And they were dying. Standing over them were other creatures that looked like giant insects. They had 4 arms with sharp claws, black eyes like a fly, and mouths full of teeth. The insect creatures were hurting the blue-skinned beings. They were doing it slowly. They were enjoying it. "Turn it off," Captain Mills said, her voice tight with anger. "No, wait," Elena said. "We need to understand what we're seeing." The computer continued to translate the sounds coming from the signal. The blue-skinned creatures were speaking. Their voices were full of pain, but the computer could understand their language. "Please," one of them said. "We have families. We have children." The insect creature laughed. The sound was horrible, like metal scraping on metal. It spoke in its own language, and the computer translated, "Your meat thoughts amuse us. Tell us more about your fear." Elena felt sick, but she kept watching. She had to understand what was happening. More blue-skinned creatures appeared on the screen. Hundreds of them. All prisoners. All afraid. The insect creatures treated them like toys. Like things to play with before throwing away. "How many of you are left?" one insect creature asked. We were billions," a blue-skinned prisoner answered. "You killed them all. We are the last few thousand." "Good," the insect creature said. "The last ones always taste the best when they despair." Dr. Park grabbed Elena's arm. "Look at the background," he said. Behind the horrible scene, Elena could see star charts on the walls. The insect creatures had maps of space, maps showing where they had been and where they were going next. Elena's blood turned cold when she saw the next destination marked on their charts. It was a small yellow star with a blue planet. It was Earth's solar system. "Computer," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Calculate the location of the broadcasting source and cross-reference with the star charts shown in the signal." The computer worked for several minutes. Then it displayed a route through space. The insect creatures were not just broadcasting their torture for entertainment. They were announcing their next target, and they were already moving toward Earth. "How long until they reach our solar system?" Captain Mills asked. The computer calculated based on the movement patterns shown in the signal. Approximately 24 months at their current speed. The team sat in silence for a long moment. They were watching the destruction of an entire species, and they were watching the creatures responsible plan to do the same thing to humanity. Elena forced herself to keep watching the broadcast. She needed to learn everything she could about these monsters. The computer called them the Vorthak, based on what they called themselves. The Vorthak seemed to think this was normal. They talked about other worlds they had visited, other species they had destroyed. They had done this dozens of times before. To them, it was entertainment. Other intelligent beings were just things to hunt and hurt and kill for fun. "We should contact Earth immediately," Captain Mills said. "Not yet," Elena replied. "We need more information. We need to understand what we're dealing with." She continued to monitor the signal throughout the night. The Vorthak kept broadcasting their torture sessions. They seemed proud of their work. They wanted others to see what they could do. But Elena noticed something else in their conversations. The Vorthak had never met a species that fought back effectively. Every world they visited either tried to hide or tried to negotiate. None had ever hurt them badly enough to make them stop. The blue-skinned creatures, who called themselves the Zelani, had tried to surrender early. They offered the Vorthak their technology, their art, their resources, anything to make the killing stop. But the Vorthak were not interested in trade or treaties. They only wanted to cause suffering. As dawn broke over the monitoring station, Elena finally had enough information. She turned to her team, her face pale but determined. "We need to contact the United Earth Council," she said. "We need to tell them what's coming." "What do we tell them?" Dr. Hassan asked. Elena looked back at her screen, where the last of the Zelani were still dying for the entertainment of their captors. She thought about Earth's cities full of people who had no idea what was heading their way. She thought about her own daughter, sleeping safely in her bed on Mars Colony. "We tell them that monsters are real," she said quietly, "and they're coming for us." Captain Mills was already reaching for the communication console. "I'll send a priority message to Earth Command. Tell them to hurry," Elena said, still watching the screen. "The Vorthak think we'll be easy prey. They think we'll beg and cry and give up like all the others did." She paused, thinking about humanity's long history of war and struggle. She thought about how humans fought when they were truly threatened. The Vorthak had destroyed dozens of peaceful civilizations, but they had never faced a species like humanity. "Tell Earth Command something else," Elena added, her voice growing harder. "Tell them the Vorthak made a mistake. They shouldn't have let us see what they do to their victims. They shouldn't have given us time to prepare." As the signal continued to broadcast the final moments of the Zelani civilization, Elena began to plan. She would learn everything she could about the Vorthak, their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses, because somewhere in the back of her mind a dark thought was growing. The Vorthak thought they were the hunters. They thought humanity would be just another easy victim. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The news from the Cerberus station reached Earth in less than 6 hours. Within 12 hours, every major government on Earth and in the colonies knew about the Vorthak. Within 24 hours, emergency sessions were being held in every capital city, from New Tokyo to Mars Central. Admiral Marcus Chen stood before the United Earth Council in Geneva, his uniform crisp and his face grim. Behind him, a large screen showed images from Elena's broadcast. The council members, representatives from every nation and colony, sat in shocked silence as they watched the final moments of the Zelani civilization. "As you can see," Admiral Chen said, his voice steady despite the horror on the screen, "we are dealing with a threat unlike anything humanity has ever faced. These creatures, the Vorthak, do not want our resources or our territory. They want to destroy us for entertainment." The president of the European Federation, Maria Santos, spoke first. "How certain are we that they're heading for Earth?" "Computer analysis of their star charts shows a 98.7% probability that our solar system is their next target," Chen replied. "They will reach the outer colonies in approximately 22 months. The room erupted in voices. Some council members demanded immediate military action. Others suggested trying to negotiate. A few even proposed abandoning the outer colonies and fortifying Earth itself. Admiral Chen raised his hand for silence. "Before we discuss options, you need to see more of what Dr. Vasquez has discovered." The screen changed to show intercepted Vorthak communications. The computer had been working around the clock to translate their language. What it found made everyone in the room feel sick. The Vorthak were not just random killers. They had a system. They had destroyed 47 civilizations over the past 300 years. Each time they followed the same pattern. Arrive with overwhelming force. Capture as many survivors as possible, then slowly kill them while broadcasting the deaths across their empire. "They treat genocide like we treat sports," Chen explained. "Different Vorthak clans compete to see who can cause the most creative suffering. The broadcasts are watched by billions of their kind for entertainment." Dr. Vasquez appeared on the screen via video link from the Cerberus station. She looked tired, but her voice was clear and angry. "The worst part," she said, "is how they talk about us. They've been monitoring our broadcasts for decades. They know about our art, our music, our emotions, and they're excited about it." "Excited?" asked the Prime Minister of Australia. They think humans will provide better entertainment than any species they've encountered before, Elena explained. Our emotional range is wider than most aliens they've met. They expect to be able to torture us for decades before we all die. The council chamber fell silent. The representatives stared at the screen, trying to understand what they had just heard. Then something changed in the room. It was not something anyone could point to exactly, but the silence felt different. It felt dangerous. The Secretary General of the United Nations, David Kim, stood up slowly. His voice was quiet when he spoke, but everyone could hear the steel in it. Dr. Vasquez, he said, what do we know about Vorthak military capabilities? Elena's image on the screen showed a slight smile. It was not a happy smile. That's the interesting part, sir. They've never had to develop advanced military tactics. Every species they've encountered either surrendered immediately or was too weak to fight back effectively. What does that mean? Asked the representative from Luna Colony. It means they're not prepared for a real war, Admiral Chen answered. They're used to hunting prey, not fighting predators. The change in the room was becoming more obvious now. The shock and fear were being replaced by something else, something colder and more focused. The president of Mars Colony, a former military officer named Robert Kane, stood up. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard as steel. Admiral Chen, he said, what would you need to make these creatures regret ever hearing about humanity? Chen smiled. It was the smile of a shark. Give me 18 months and the full resources of human space, and I'll show them what happens when you threaten our children. Over the next few days, something unprecedented happened. Humanity began to unite in a way it never had before. Countries that had been enemies for centuries started sharing military technology. Corporations that had competed for decades began working together. Colonies that had demanded independence suddenly pledged their full support to Earth. Dr. Vasquez continued to monitor Vorthak communications from her station. What she found both encouraged and frightened her. The Vorthak were completely unprepared for organized resistance. Their military doctrine was simple: arrive with enough ships to overwhelm any defense, then hunt down survivors. They had never faced an enemy that prepared for their arrival or used advanced tactics. But they were not stupid. Their technology was advanced and their ships were powerful. They had weapons that could destroy planets and shields that could stop most attacks. What they lacked was experience fighting a real war. They're like lions who have only ever hunted sheep, Elena explained to her team. They're dangerous, but they've never had to fight wolves. Meanwhile, Admiral Chen was meeting with military leaders from across human space. The conversations were not about defense or evacuation. They were about something much darker. We're not going to run, Chen told his assembled generals and admirals. We're not going to hide. And we're not going to try to negotiate with monsters who torture children for fun. General Lisa Park, commander of Mars Defense Forces, nodded grimly. What are you proposing, Admiral? Total war, Chen replied simply. Not just against their invasion fleet, but against their entire civilization. We're going to hunt down every Vorthak in the galaxy and make sure they never threaten anyone again. The room was quiet for a moment. Then General Park smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Finally, she said, a war worth fighting. Across human space, the greatest minds of the species began working on the problem of Vorthak extermination. Engineers who had built wonders now designed weapons of unprecedented destruction. Scientists who had cured diseases now created new ways to kill. Artists who had celebrated life now planned death with terrible creativity. Dr. James Wright, humanity's foremost expert on military strategy, was given unlimited resources to study the problem. His conclusion was simple and terrifying. The Vorthak think they're apex predators, he told Admiral Chen. But they've never met humans. We're not prey animals. We're persistence hunters. We're pack hunters. And when something threatens our pack, we don't just kill it. We make sure it never threatens anyone ever again. As the months passed, something fundamental changed in human civilization. The same species that had created beautiful art and music and literature now focused all of its creativity on a single goal: the complete destruction of everything that called itself Vorthak. The Vorthak, meanwhile, continued their slow approach toward Earth's solar system. Their communications showed growing excitement as they got closer. They were planning the greatest entertainment event in their history. They expected humanity to provide decades of suffering for their amusement. They had no idea what was waiting for them in the darkness around a small blue world. They had no idea that humanity had spent months preparing for their arrival. And they had no idea that their victims had decided not to be victims anymore. The hunters were coming, but this time they were about to become the hunted. 18 months had passed since Elena first detected the Vorthak signal. The solar system had become the busiest construction zone in human history. Every shipyard from Mercury to Saturn was working at full capacity. But the ships they were building were unlike anything humanity had ever created before. Commander Sarah Lou floated in zero gravity inside the secret construction facility, hidden behind Jupiter's largest moon. Around her, thousands of workers put the finishing touches on the Ghost Fleet. These ships were humanity's secret weapon, and they were beautiful in a terrible way. "Status report," she said into her communicator. "All systems green, Commander," came the reply from Chief Engineer Martinez. "The stealth systems are working better than expected. Even our own sensors can barely detect them." Sarah smiled coldly. The Ghost Fleet was designed for one purpose: to kill Vorthak without being seen. Each ship was covered in technology that made it nearly invisible. They could move through space like shadows, striking without warning and disappearing before the enemy could respond. But stealth was only part of humanity's plan. On Mars, Dr. James Wright stood in front of the largest holographic display ever built. It showed the entire solar system in perfect detail, with thousands of red dots marking Vorthak positions and blue dots marking human forces. "Computer, run simulation 14847, he said. The display came alive with movement. Red dots representing the Vorthak fleet moved confidently toward Earth. They were not trying to hide or move carefully. They expected no real resistance. Then the blue dots began to move. What happened next was not a battle in the traditional sense. It was an execution. The blue dots surrounded the red ones from every direction, appearing from seemingly empty space. The red dots began disappearing one by one, unable to fight back against enemies they could not see. "Simulation complete," the computer announced. "Vorthak fleet eliminated with 0 human casualties." Wright nodded, but he was not satisfied. The simulation had run almost 15,000 times, and every time the result was the same. Total victory for humanity. But Wright was not planning just one battle. He was planning the extermination of an entire species. "Computer, expand the simulation to include the Vorthak home system," he said. The display grew larger, showing star systems hundreds of light years away. Wright began moving pieces around the holographic map like a chess master planning the perfect game. Meanwhile, Dr. Vasquez had not been idle at her monitoring station. She had spent months learning everything possible about Vorthak culture and technology. What she had discovered was both encouraging and terrifying. "The good news," she explained to Admiral Chen during their daily briefing, "is that they're completely unprepared for real warfare. They have powerful weapons and strong shields, but their tactics are primitive." "And the bad news?" Chen asked. "They're not the only ones out there," Elena replied grimly. "I've detected broadcasts from at least 6 other similar species. The galaxy is full of predators who hunt intelligent life for entertainment." Chen was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he smiled, and Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She had known the Admiral for years, but she had never seen him look so coldly determined. "Then we'll have to deal with all of them," he said simply. On Earth, the transformation of human society continued. Factories that had once made consumer goods now produced weapons and ships. Universities that had taught art and literature now focused on military engineering and xenobiology. Even children in schools were learning about space warfare and alien biology. But the most important changes were happening in the minds of humanity itself. The species that had once fought wars over territory and resources had found a new purpose. They were no longer fighting each other. They were preparing to become the galaxy's apex predator. Dr. Hassan, the computer specialist from Cerberus Station, had been reassigned to Earth's most classified project. In a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, he worked with the most advanced artificial intelligence ever created. "Prometheus run analysis pattern 7739, he said to the computer. The AI, named after the Greek god who stole fire for humanity, had been designed for one purpose: to be better at warfare than any biological mind could ever be. It had studied every human military conflict in history. It had analyzed every piece of Vorthak technology and culture, and it had designed strategies that no human could have imagined. Analysis complete, Prometheus replied in a voice that sounded almost human. Recommended strategy: complete extermination of Vorthak species, followed by systematic elimination of all similar predator species within 500 light-years of human space. Time frame? Hassan asked. 57 years for total completion, assuming no unexpected resistance. Hassan stared at the screen. The AI was proposing the deliberate extinction of multiple alien species. A year ago, he would have been horrified by such a suggestion. Now, after watching Vorthak broadcasts for months, he found himself nodding in agreement. Begin Phase 1 preparations, he told the machine. As the Vorthak fleet drew closer to Earth's solar system, their communications became more excited. They had been monitoring human broadcasts and were pleased with what they saw. Humans showed a wide range of emotions, which would make their suffering more entertaining. Human art and music suggested they were creative, which meant they would probably beg in interesting ways before dying. The Vorthak had no idea that every one of their communications was being intercepted and analyzed. They did not know that humanity had spent months studying their technology and tactics. They could not imagine that their intended victims had spent over a year preparing for their arrival. Most importantly, they could not understand that humanity was no longer thinking like prey. Captain Mills, now promoted to general, stood on the bridge of the new Earth Defense Command Center. Around her, hundreds of officers monitored every aspect of human space. They tracked every Vorthak ship, analyzed every alien communication, and prepared for the most important battle in human history. General, her communications officer reported. We're receiving a broadcast from the Vorthak fleet. Put it on screen, Mills ordered. The main display showed a Vorthak commander, its insect-like face twisted in what might have been amusement. It spoke in its harsh metallic language, and the computer provided translation. Humans of the small blue world, it said, we are the Vorthak. We have come to harvest your suffering for our entertainment. Surrender now, and we will make your deaths last only a few decades. Resist, and we will make them last centuries. The bridge was silent for a moment. Then General Mills began to laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a predator that had just seen easy prey walk into its trap. Communications, open a channel to all human forces, she ordered. Channel open, General. Mills looked directly into the camera, her eyes hard as steel. All ships, all stations, all commands, she said. The Vorthak have just made a mistake. They have threatened our children. They have promised to torture our families. They have declared war on humanity. She paused, letting her words sink in across human space. Show them what happens when prey animals decide to stop being prey. Across the solar system, the Ghost Fleet began to move. Invisible ships slipped through space like shadows, taking positions around the approaching Vorthak fleet. Weapons systems came online. Targeting computers locked onto alien ships. Thousands of human warriors prepared for battle. But this would not be a battle in any traditional sense. It would be a demonstration, a lesson, a warning to the galaxy that humanity was no longer prey. The Vorthak fleet continued its confident approach toward Earth, expecting terror and surrender. Instead, they were about to discover that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. The Vorthak fleet entered the outer edge of Earth's solar system like conquering heroes. 300 massive ships, each one larger than a human city, moved in perfect formation toward their prize. Their communications buzzed with excitement as they discussed the entertainment they would soon harvest from the small blue world ahead. Warlord Zektar, commander of the fleet, stood in the central bridge of his flagship. His forearms gestured with pleasure as he watched the sensor displays show empty space around them. As expected, the humans were cowering on their planets, offering no resistance. Begin long-range scanning of the inner planets, he ordered his crew. I want to know how many meat mines we have to work with. The scanner operator, a younger Vorthak with bright red eyes, worked at his console for several minutes. Then he looked up with confusion. Warlord, he said hesitantly, I'm not detecting any major population centers on the outer colonies. What do you mean? Zektar demanded. The human colonies on the gas giant moons appear to be empty, sir. Zektar moved to the scanner station and looked at the readings himself. The young operator was right. Mars showed some activity, but much less than expected. The asteroid mining stations were completely silent. Even Earth itself seemed strangely quiet. Perhaps they are hiding in underground shelters, Zektar decided. Cowardly meat mines often do this. Continue the advance. We will find them all eventually. What Warlord Zektar did not know was that he was already surrounded. Commander Sarah Liu watched the Vorthak fleet from her position aboard the stealth ship, Shadow of Death. Around her, 200 other Ghost Fleet vessels maintained perfect invisibility while moving into attack positions. Each ship was crewed by volunteers who had spent months studying Vorthak weaknesses and preparing for this moment. All ships report ready, Commander, her tactical officer whispered. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing Vorthak positions. The alien fleet was moving in a tight formation, exactly as human intelligence had predicted. They were not scanning for hidden enemies because they had never needed to before. Dr. Vasquez, Sarah said into her communicator. Are you monitoring their communications? Elena's voice came back from her position on the command ship Retribution. Yes, Commander. They're confused by the low population readings, but they think we're just hiding. They have no idea what's coming. Sarah smiled coldly. The Vorthak were about to learn what it felt like to be hunted. All ships, she broadcast on the secure human frequency, commence Operation Ghost Strike. What happened next had been planned and practiced for over a year. The Ghost Fleet moved like a pack of wolves, surrounding their prey with perfect coordination. Each human ship targeted specific Vorthak vessels, using detailed intelligence about alien ship design and weapons placement. The attack began with the outer edge of the Vorthak formation. The first alien ship simply exploded. One moment it was cruising confidently through space, the next it was an expanding cloud of debris. The crew never knew what hit them. Then the second ship died. Then the third. On the Vorthak flagship, chaos erupted. Report, Warlord Zektar screamed at his tactical officer. Ships are being destroyed, but I cannot detect any attackers. The officer replied, his voice high with panic. Our sensors show empty space. More Vorthak ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The alien formation began to break apart as ships tried to maneuver away from an enemy they could not see. All ships return fire, Zektar ordered. The Vorthak fleet began shooting wildly into empty space. Their weapons were powerful enough to destroy planets, but they could not hit targets they could not detect. Meanwhile, human ships continued their methodical destruction of the alien fleet. Dr. Wright, monitoring the battle from his command center on Mars, watched with grim satisfaction as his plan unfolded perfectly. Prometheus, he said to the AI, what is the current Vorthak fleet strength? Enemy fleet reduced to 67% combat effectiveness, as the machine replied. No human casualties reported. Wright nodded. The battle was proceeding exactly as simulated. But destroying the Vorthak fleet was only the beginning of his plan. Begin Phase 2, he ordered. Across the solar system, human ships began broadcasting on Vorthak frequencies. But they were not sending threats or demands for surrender. They were sending something much more disturbing. The broadcast showed footage from inside destroyed Vorthak ships. The same creatures that had tortured the Zalani for entertainment were now dying in fear and confusion. Human cameras captured their final moments as they realized they had become the prey. Admiral Chen, commanding from his flagship, opened a communication channel to the remaining Vorthak fleet. Warlord Zektar, he said in perfect Vorthak language, this is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Human Space Fleet. We need to talk. On the alien flagship, Zektar stared at the communication screen in shock. A human was speaking his language and speaking it well. You are the leader of the meat mines? Zektar asked, confusion clear in his metallic voice. I am the leader of the species you came here to torture and kill, Chen replied calmly. How is that working out for you? Around them, more Vorthak ships exploded as the Ghost Fleet continued its attack. The aliens were firing wildly in all directions, but they had not managed to hit a single human vessel. What do you want? Zektar demanded. Chen's smile was visible on the screen, and it made the Vorthak warlord feel something he had never experienced before. Fear. I want you to understand something very important, Chen said. You came here thinking we were prey. You thought you would harvest our suffering for your entertainment. You were wrong. More explosions lit up space around them. The Vorthak fleet was now reduced to less than half its original size, and the survivors were in complete panic. We are not prey, Chen continued. We are predators, and you have just made yourselves our targets. Wait! Zektar shouted as another of his ships exploded nearby. We can negotiate. We have technology, resources. You have nothing we want, Chen interrupted. Except your lives. And we're taking those. The Vorthak warlord looked around his bridge at his panicking crew. These were warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity. "If you let us leave," Zektar said desperately, "we will never return to this system. We will mark it as forbidden territory." Chen laughed, and the sound made every Vorthak on the bridge flinch. "You still don't understand," he said. "This isn't about protecting our system. This is about making sure you never threaten anyone, anywhere, ever again." The Admiral turned to someone off-screen, then looked back at Zektar. "Dr. Vasquez has been studying your culture for over a year," Chen said. "She's located your homeworld, your colonies, your trade routes. Every Vorthak in the galaxy." Zektar's forearms began to shake. "You cannot mean a total extermination," Chen confirmed. "Every ship, every station, every world. We're going to hunt down every member of your species and make sure none of you ever hurt anyone again." The Vorthak warlord looked at his tactical display. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy he could not see. His warriors, who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries, were dying like helpless animals. But we are Vorthak," he protested. "We are the apex predators of the galaxy." "Not anymore," Chen replied. "Now you're extinct." The last thing Warlord Zektar saw was a human missile materializing from empty space, heading directly for his ship's bridge. Then there was light and heat and nothing. Commander Liu watched the final Vorthak ship explode and felt a grim satisfaction. The alien fleet that had come to harvest human suffering was now nothing but debris floating in space. "All ships, report status," she ordered. One by one, the Ghost Fleet ships reported in. Every single human vessel had survived the battle without damage. The Vorthak fleet, 300 ships strong, had been completely destroyed. But Liu knew this was just the beginning. Somewhere across the galaxy, other Vorthak fleets were preparing to do to other species what they had planned to do to humanity. "Dr. Vasquez," Liu said into her communicator, "begin broadcasting our victory to all Vorthak frequencies. I want every one of them to know what happened here." "Already on it, Commander," Elena replied. "The entire Vorthak Empire is about to learn that their hunters just became the hunted." As the human fleet began to clean up the debris from the destroyed alien ships, Admiral Chen was already planning the next phase of the war. The Vorthak had made the mistake of threatening humanity's children. Now they would learn what happened when prey animals decided to become predators. The galaxy was about to change forever. 1 year after the destruction of the Vorthak invasion fleet, Dr. Elena Vasquez sat in a broadcasting studio on Earth. The room was designed to look exactly like the chambers where the Vorthak had tortured their victims. The same cold lighting, the same camera angles, the same feeling of dread. But today the roles were reversed. On the table in front of Elena sat a small device that would broadcast her message across the galaxy on every Vorthak frequency. Behind her, barely visible in the shadows, stood 5 captured Vorthak commanders. They were the survivors of various human raids on Vorthak outposts over the past year. Elena looked directly into the camera and began to speak in perfect Vorthak language. "Greetings to the Vorthak Empire," she said, her voice calm and cold. "My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez of the human species. You may remember us. We are the meat mines you came to harvest for entertainment." She paused, letting her words sink in across Vorthak space. "I am here today to make an announcement. Your entertainment empire is over." Elena gestured to the prisoners behind her. "These are some of your former commanders. They led fleets that destroyed entire civilizations for your amusement. Today they are going to provide entertainment for a different audience. On the Vorthak homeworld of Vorthak Prime, billions of the insect-like creatures watched their screens in confusion and growing fear. Never before had their victims spoken to them directly. Never before had someone else controlled their broadcasts. High Commander Vexthak, leader of the entire Vorthak Empire, stared at his screen from his palace throne room. Around him, his advisors whispered in panic. "How are they broadcasting on our frequencies?" he demanded. "Unknown, my lord," his chief technician replied. "We cannot stop the signal. It is coming from everywhere at once." On the screen, Elena continued her broadcast. "For 300 years you have hunted intelligent species across the galaxy. You treated genocide like entertainment. You broadcast the suffering of innocent beings for your own amusement." She stood and walked toward the captured Vorthak commanders. "You made one critical error. You let us see what you were planning to do to our children. You gave us time to prepare, and you underestimated what happens when prey animals decide to stop being prey. Elena picked up a small device from the table. It looked harmless, but the Vorthak commanders recoiled in terror when they saw it. This device contains a virus specifically designed for Vorthak biology, Elena explained calmly. It was created by our best scientists after studying your physiology for months. It causes complete system failure in approximately 60 seconds. She activated the device and placed it near the first captured commander. Unlike you, Elena said as the alien began to convulse, we do not torture our enemies for entertainment. We eliminate them efficiently. The Vorthak commander died quickly, its body shutting down as the virus attacked its nervous system. Elena moved to the second prisoner. This is not revenge, she explained as she activated another virus device. Revenge would imply that we are angry. We are not angry. We are simply removing a problem. Across Vorthak space, billions of viewers watched in stunned silence as their former commanders died one by one. These were warriors who had conquered star systems, leaders who had directed the slaughter of entire species. Now they were dying like animals while a human calmly explained why. Your empire has ended, Elena continued as the third commander died. Over the past year, human fleets have systematically located and destroyed every Vorthak colony, outpost, and trade station within 200 light-years of our space. Admiral Chen appeared on the screen behind her, his uniform clean and his expression calm. We have eliminated 347 Vorthak installations, he reported. Current enemy casualties stand at approximately 14 million. No human casualties reported. Elena nodded and moved to the fourth prisoner. We have also located all 6 species that follow similar practices to yours, she said as the alien died. The Kreshti who hunt children for sport. The Maltekfa who collect sentient beings as living art. The others who think intelligence makes good prey. She paused at the final commander, a high-ranking Vorthak who had personally overseen the destruction of 12 civilizations. They are all on our list now, Elena said simply. On Vorthak Prime, High Commander Vexthak rose from his throne in fury. This is impossible, he shouted at his advisors. They are just one small species. We have millions of ships, billions of warriors. His chief military advisor, General Kaxmoth, looked at his tactical displays with growing horror. My lord, he said quietly, our outer colonies have gone silent. All of them. Even the ones humans should not know about. What do you mean? Sir, according to our monitors, human fleets have appeared simultaneously at over 100 Vorthak systems. They are not following any pattern we understand. They seem to know exactly where all our hidden bases are located. Vexthak stared at the display showing Vorthak space. Red dots marked systems that had gone silent. There were hundreds of them, and more were disappearing every hour. How is this possible? He whispered. On the screen, Elena was finishing her broadcast. To any Vorthak listening to this message, she said, understand that your hunting days are over. Human fleets are already moving through your territory. We have mapped every world you control, every ship you possess, every hiding place you think is secret. She looked directly into the camera, and her eyes were as cold as the space between stars. We are not interested in your surrender. We are not interested in negotiations. We are not interested in mercy. We are interested in making sure that no species like yours ever threatens innocent life again. Elena paused as the final Vorthak commander died behind her. To the other species of the galaxy, we offer this message. The age of casual predation is over. Those who hunt intelligence for sport, who treat genocide as entertainment, who prey on the innocent will answer to humanity. Admiral Chen stepped forward. Any species that practices these activities has exactly 1 standard year to cease all such behavior and make restitution to their victims. After that, they will be treated as the Vorthak are being treated. Elena returned to her position in front of the camera. This concludes our introduction to galactic society, she said. Humanity does not seek to conquer or rule. We have only one export. The promise that monsters will be hunted by monsters. The broadcast ended, but the message continued to repeat on every Vorthak frequency across the galaxy. High Commander Vexthak stared at his dark screen in disbelief. Then he turned to his military advisor. General, he said urgently, contact our reserve fleets. All of them. We need to mount a counterattack immediately. General Kaxmoth looked at his communications console and shook his head slowly. Sir, he said quietly, there are no reserve fleets left to contact. What do you mean? Sir, the humans have been very thorough. Every major Vorthak military installation has been destroyed. Our shipyards, our training centers, our weapons factories, all gone. Vexthak felt something he had never experienced before in his long life. True despair. How long do we have? He asked. Caxmoth checked his displays one more time. Based on their current rate of advance, human fleets will reach Vorthak Prime in approximately 6 months. The High Commander looked around his throne room at the advisors and guards who had served him for decades. These were the leaders of an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. Now they were just waiting to die. Send a message to the humans, Vexthak said finally. Offer them anything. Territory, technology, slaves, anything they want. General Caxmoth shook his head sadly. Sir, we already tried that after their first attack. They were very clear in their response. What did they say? They said they already have everything they want from us, sir. Our deaths. Across the galaxy, other predator species that had built their civilizations on hunting and tormenting intelligent life began to receive similar messages. The Kreshti homeworld went dark 3 days after Elena's broadcast. The Maltekva Empire surrendered entirely rather than face human fleets, only to discover that surrender was not accepted. One by one, the species that had turned genocide into entertainment learned what it felt like to be hunted by something more dangerous than themselves. Dr. Elena Vasquez returned to her monitoring station beyond Pluto, but her job had changed completely. Instead of listening for signals from unknown civilizations, she now coordinated the systematic elimination of known threats. Admiral Chen, she reported during their daily briefing, Prometheus has identified 3 more predator species operating in the outer spiral. Estimated population 47 million total. Time frame for elimination? Chen asked. 18 months, assuming no unexpected complications. Chen nodded calmly. The same man who had once explored space in wonder now planned genocide with the efficiency of an accountant. Approved. Begin preparations. As Elena signed off, she looked out at the stars and thought about the galaxy they were creating. It would be a safer place, she knew. Species like humanity's own children would be able to grow and explore without fear of being hunted for entertainment. But it would also be a galaxy that had learned a terrible lesson. That sometimes the only way to stop monsters was to become something even more monstrous.